Okay, here we go. There we go. Now we can see that we are officially live, which is good. Feels like a news broadcast, actually, doesn't it? So I'm not sure how this works yet, but hopefully we'll start to see some people join online. I know there was quite a few people that aren't able to join live, but because we're recording it, it's an option to send that to our contacts and people that are interested later, which is good.
Yeah, I had a few people that were interested. I'm just trying to join from my phone. Oh, here we are. I'm coming in.
Yay.
There you go. Okay.
Good. So we know someone's there.
If I say testing, comment successful on LinkedIn. Okay, and it's come through to the comments in that side tab. That's cool. So that works. I will get off the link on my phone.
You can see yours? Okay.
Yep. I've turned my phone off now.
Good. Excellent. All right, we'll just wait for another couple of minutes for people to kind of log on.
Can you see other people?
No.
Being here? No, me neither. That's okay.
It's probably a good thing. It's one of those psychological tests when you see how many people you've got on and then you kind of, oh my God, there's not many or there's too many or.
Yeah. Good, just good not to know.
I know. I remember doing a webinar a few years ago, and you could see the numbers, and they would kind of creep up, and then they drop, and then they creep up, and then they drop. And you go, oh my God, it's so distracting sometimes. So be careful. All right. Let's do it. Okay, so we've got half an hour together. Thank you for those of you who are joining us live. This is the first time that we've ever done LinkedIn Live before, so bear with us. We're learning the technology side of things. I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Abby Hunt. I'm one of the co-founders of datadrivesinsight.com. and a counselling psychologist and executive coach. And joining me is Emma, and Emma Clark is from Empowering Humans, and she's an executive coach. Today, we're talking about beating burnout, something I think we can all relate to personally, and I'm sure we've all got stories that we can kind of relate to and perhaps want to share at times. So it's an opportunity for us today to talk a little bit about what it is. I think we all know what it is, but more importantly, what some of the strategies are that we might be using in our own workplaces, Emma, and see if we can share some of those insights and strategies that might be impactful for other people who are joining us today. So thank you, Emma, for joining us. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. You're in the optimal level of stress, or are we hitting the burnout zone at the moment? How are you going for yourself personally today?
I'm in a good spot these days, which is nice. So
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Look, I think when you and I started preparing for this conversation last week, one of the things we talked about was starting with a bit of a definition of what burnout is, and there's a lot out there in terms of what different perspectives of what burnout looks like. But I remember you having a pretty strong view around feeling a bit like, well, they're always based around workplaces. So do you want to share a little bit about your views on definitions and anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of years ago, the World Health Organization included burnout in its update to the International Classification of Diseases. And it's captured as an occupational phenomenon. It's not a medical condition, but it's a syndrome. And they say that it's resulting from chronic workplace stress that's not been successfully managed. Mm-hmm. They talk about sort of what that encompasses. But they also specifically say that burnout only in this context only refers to the occupational context and shouldn't be applied to describe experience in other areas of life. Which on the one hand is great that there is a medical definition and therefore access to treatment pathways and support for people experiencing occupational burnout. But that's not the whole story, in my opinion. I think we're all human when we go to work, right? So none of us leave everything else at home and just show up as a blank slate with a fully charged battery, and a full cup. Whatever's happening at home comes to work, and vice versa. We're human. And so I think a definition that solely focuses on the occupational aspect is missing a lot. So there are other types of burnout that are documented. Life is stressful, and ongoing stress, I believe, leads to burnout. There's documented sort of evidence around carer burnout. We know that neurospicy brains are more prone to burnout, so neurodivergent burnout's quite well documented as well. So I think it's complex. And I like to think of the sort of holistic approach to thinking about stress management, and further down the track, if you're heading towards that burnout space, then it's not just one aspect.
Yeah, spot on. I think with the many clients that I see and have seen throughout the time I've been practicing, it can present itself very differently. Burnout can present itself very differently. I remember as a new psych many years ago, meeting one of my clients out in the waiting room, and he was a principal, had been a teacher for I don't know, maybe 20 something years at the time, and then he'd become a principal in the last 5 years. And I met him out in the waiting room, said hello, seemed presented really normally, if I should put it that way. And we had a great little banter as we were walking back into my office, sat down. I said, so tell me what's brought you here today. And at that moment, something clicked. He broke down. He fell on the floor in the fetal position. He was done. He was absolutely, had been holding it in to that time and then let it out at that point. And that's burnout at its kind of extreme, I think. Have you had similar incidences in your experience?
I think my personal experience with burnout was that it was multifactorial for me. I had a big job. I was caring for my daughter who was really unwell, and those two things combined without there just wasn't enough support. There was support, but it just wasn't enough, right? And so sort of the equivalent of the laying on the ground in the fetal position was for me going, I have to change my life. I have to take control. I'm the only one that can do this, and things have to change. And then, and for me, then that was a catalyst then to be able to think about what I could change and what I couldn't change, because I tried lots of things along the way, right? You don't get to that point without having tried things along the way.
I think that's a really good point, because we all experience stress, right, at times, and there's good stress, there's destructive stress, etc. But often when we get to a point of feeling like we're just about hitting that tipping point, we often self-correct, so we're able to kind of go, all right, something's out of whack here. Let me see if I can pull a few things back, or do things a little bit differently, or think about things a little bit differently. And so normally we kind of hit that point and we're able to self-correct. When we don't self-correct and we get into that kind of really destructive level of stress, you're right. It's not that we haven't tried things already. It's just that what we've tried perhaps isn't working anymore. And there might be some fundamentally some deeper things going on. I know you talked about before around some of the sources of what's underlying some of the challenges that's driving this burnout. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that I love to do with clients is to get underneath the stress. So, most of my clients aren't in burnout, but they, have a lot of stress, generally coming from their professional sort of, big demanding roles. And those roles have always been big and demanding, and they always will be big and demanding. And, the flavor of big and demanding changes, over time. But the the underlying that is this sort of feeling of how you respond to stress. What is it about that is sort of activating that fight and flight response, that sometimes you can get stuck in for a prolonged period of time, and can lead to lots of problems down the track. But a lot of that stuff is it's pre-programmed. A lot of it comes back to our childhood, around the feelings that we have about things, and whether or not those feelings feel safe.
Yeah, spot on. It always comes back to our parents, doesn't it?
It does, which is really scary when you're a parent.
I know. It's something we'll probably come back to in the later half of this conversation, as one of the strategies and one of the motivating factors for getting on top of our stress. Because what our children watch in us is something that the patterns can be repeated generationally. Look, one of the things would be useful to talk about, because you like myself work in lots of different industries, and we can chat GBT it, but I'm interested in your experiences of what are some of the industries that you are coming across that are presenting with some of the highest levels of burnout, and your thoughts around that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think most of my clients, so my background is in healthcare, so I'm very familiar with healthcare and most sort of aspects of healthcare. So that's my background. Most of my clients that I currently have are in health or education.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things about industries like health and education is they are full of professional people who are well educated and passionate about what they do. And most have this desire to improve things, make things better for people, and they care. And I think that's one of the things about stress that comes from work, is the desire to help and the desire to make things better. And when that's feeling like it's not being achieved, that can really get in the way for people of seeing the value in what they're doing. And having value in your work is really important to a lot of people. But I think there's that saying about if you don't care, you can't burn out. And I think the people that I see that really struggle with stress and burnout, they're passionate. They want to do good. They want to achieve things for people or for the greater good. And that's really stressful for them when things get in their way or things don't work out the way they were sort of hoping that they would, or they're not having the impact that they want. So I have a number of clients that come to me with, I want to have greater impact.
Okay.
And then when we unpack that, there's a lot of sort of stress management and things that come out in our discussions.
Yeah, the things that's coming up for me as you say that is at what cost. So when I want to have greater impact on other people, it's usually because I care deeply about other people or the mission or the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And it's like the spinning plates. Like as I put more focus over here, it means that something else has to take the hit. And it usually, and from my experience, it usually means it comes at a cost for us personally. One of the case studies I thought would be useful that kind of links in with what you're just sharing then, is a CEO of an aged care organisation. He's spoken about this publicly. He's a brilliant person, who's a real advocate for self-care, particularly as role modelling for the rest of the organisation. And he did he completed the Silka 360, which is one of our tools, but he'd done a lot of 360s in the past where you kind of go, oh, this is what I need to work on, these are the areas that I'm good at. I think there's a lot of value in 360s. The interesting one about this, why this one had an impact for him, when the way that the questions are filled in, or asked, there's a lot of capabilities around how effective you are as a leader. But one of the areas is around, and the three areas that came up was him lacking in practice of self-care, manages his own stress, and manages his mental health. Everything else was looking really good. Now, what was interesting is that he, in his thinking, it was around, well, I know that I'm not managing my self-care. I've gained weight or I'm not exercising. So I know that already about myself. But now I know that other people know that about me. That's my catalyst for wanting to change. Because before it was like, if I look after me, I'm not looking after other people. Yeah. Or if
Yeah.
I spend time looking after me, then it comes at a cost to the organization because there's still work that needs to be done. When he was able to flip it and go, oh, they want me to shift. They see the value in me looking after myself so that I can, role model better to the rest of the culture and the rest of the team. You get the gist. But so that was a real activating event for him, which again, it gets to the thinking, which is kind of what you talked about before. What are those core beliefs that are formed? And I think, again, the care industry, the health industry, the education sector, they are quite prevalent with burnout because of that mindset of my purpose is to help others. So when I work with people, how do you shift that? So, by looking after me allows me to do the great work I do for others. And when people start to really believe that, it just shifts and changes their behavior beautifully.
Yeah, and I think as a leader, there's that responsibility, right, to kind of model the way. And I think that, again, like I say, we're all human, right? And we all bring all of us to work every day.
Yeah.
And so there's that blend between personal and professional. If we're modeling the way professionally around how we carry ourselves in the organization, how we perform, how we collaborate, how we behave, we also sort of have we also should be kind of modeling the way as a human, and doing the right thing and looking after ourselves as well as other people. um and I think it's interesting there that you mentioned self-care, and I think self-care's got a really bad rap these days. um I often refer to it as sort of self-leadership.
That's nice.
Because I think, yeah, self-care, some people are like, oh yeah, massages and bubble baths, and and sometimes self-care is doing the hard stuff, right? Taking a good, honest look at yourself, and doing the hard things, and making changes like that leader that you talked about, making lifestyle and health changes. They can be really hard for people.
Yeah. It's kind of like we all know that we should eat well. We all know we should exercise more. We all know what we should do. But so it's not about teaching people necessarily new skills on how to eat better. Sometimes people need that, but for the most part, people know how to do those things. It's the belief system that's driving us to not do those things, which needs to be really unpacked. Which is what you're saying, I think, when you're saying it's doing the work. Really getting in there.
Yeah. And I think it's, often comes down to, that sort of sense of priorities, and getting really clear about what your priorities are. Yeah. And where do you sit? As a human, where do you sit on that list?
Absolutely. So let's talk about strategies, because unless there's some other things that you wanted to mention before we kind of get into strategies, was there?
No,
All
let's
good?
get into strategies, because I think that's
Okay.
what people will find useful.
Absolutely. So when you think about, as practitioners, there's some kind of go-to kind of approaches that we might use each time that we're working with people, knowing that it's not a one size fits all. But what are you finding as the most helpful strategies for people that you're working with who are experiencing or on their way to experiencing burnout?
Yeah, so I think similar to sort of what we've already touched upon, it's about really getting to the root of what's causing the stress. So, and sometimes that starts off being, my underachieving, underperforming employee is causing me stress, or this big change that's coming in is causing me stress, or the new policy or mandate or restructure, or managing redundancies, big things like that cause stress. And they understandably cause some stress, but they sort of affect different people differently. it's about getting a really sort of holistic view of, what does life look like for you? How much support do you have? What does home look like? And then understanding what it is about that thing that's happening right now that's brought them to coaching.
Yeah.
What is it about that is so stressful for you? What are your thoughts about the thing? What does the thing represent to you? Those types of things, that type of work is really important. And I'm not dissing self-care for a moment, and I absolutely encourage that with my clients, and I think that looks different for different people as well. Some people, if you tell them to go for a walk, it's not some people's thing, right? So working with clients around what are the things that they find regulating, and starting to shift people's understanding of nervous system regulation.
Okay, so is that where you start, bringing in some of the kind of presence work and breathing and etc., just to kind of help people get out? I mean, I often find, something as simple as breath work, or let's just stare at a tree and what do you notice? Like, really, really be present for a moment. It just for a minute stops all, because we're up here all the time. And often it's how do I just quieten that noise for a moment, and just be present. And it just adds a little bit of reprieve. Granted, it only lasts a little while, people, but it starts to retrain, your brain and your body into recognizing that you can have moments of reprieve from all that kind of messiness that's in our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great strategies. And for some clients, it's about understanding the nervous system.
Yeah.
So understanding that this stress is pushing us into fight and flight, and what that means, and what other sort of, regulating grounding activities that help you send signals of safety to your body, so that your body can start to kind of have those reprieves from those feelings of stress.
Yeah, great. I want to just pause for a moment and just offer people to use the chat function to ask any questions, and we'll do our best to kind of manage those along the way. And if there's any examples of things that really work for you, or that you've come across that you've had a really good strategies, please feel free to share. One of the things I wanted to just show briefly was a little diagram that I often use with my clients, and it's a good little test, and most people have probably seen something like this before, but it's a bit of a stress curve that I like to talk about with people to kind of identify where they're at. And I often use this with a lot of clients, no matter whether they're presenting with stress or burnout or whatever. You can see in the middle there, that kind of optimal performance zone is where we really want to kind of lie. But when people are feeling stress, I mentioned before, they sometimes, start to feel a little bit of that kind of strain that creeps in, starting to go, oh, I'm feeling a little bit more stretched than what I was hoping to. And it starts to, pull us down that slope pretty quickly. So I often like to ask people, so where do you think you are on that curve at the moment? And what is it that you feel you need in order to get back into that optimal level? Now, I know we've been talking about burnout, but there is something really important around what they call bore out, okay, which is when we feel like we're talented and we're skilled, but in our current role or in our whatever position we're talking about, we're not feeling like we're being utilized. We're not using those skills, and when we're not using our skills and we're not feeling we're living our purpose, or we're not feeling like we're adding value, it can actually lead to a lot of stress. So it's a useful diagram that I often use to kind of have that discovery conversation, Emma, that you were talking about before, to really unpack where people are at and what's going on for them. When you are in that optimal level of performance, how do you know? What are you doing? How are you managing, the pressures of life? How's that different to how you're feeling at the moment? Those sort of questions. So I just wanted to show that, and look, I'm really happy to share this diagram and a few other things as well for people after the whatever this is called, webinar. What are some of your other go-tos, Emma?
I really like that strategy, Abby. I think that sort of that the green bit that you're talking about really relates, makes me think about that window of tolerance that we have for stress, and how when we're doing things that regulate us and send signals of safety to our body, that helps to broaden that sort of window of tolerance, or that
Yes.
green
Yeah.
the green bit in the middle. Can't remember the exact word that you used. Um, Yes, because they're in that window there. The stress is, it's stimulating, and it's energy bringing, and then it can just sort of tip a little bit into the others.
One
There
of
is a
the
question.
Yeah, please. Yeah, no, go for it.
There's a question that's in the comments that I've just seen that says, it's by one of the LinkedIn users that's watching in. It says, I wonder if burnout is worse at the moment, with the cost of living pressures.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
I I can only guess that
Yeah.
it will be yes, right? Like,
Yeah.
if people are having financial stress, it's only going to add to the container of stress. So there's
Yeah.
less space in there for other stress in people's
Yeah.
lives. And
I think we're seeing that in we do a lot of at Data Drives Insight. We do a lot of team assessments in terms of identifying what are some of the psychosocial risk factors that people are experiencing within the team. So one of those things might be around how am I balancing my work-life priorities? Am I feeling like it's safe for me to share that I'm struggling? And so what we are certainly seeing at the moment is there's a lot more discussion when we do debriefs with groups, that there are more discussions around financial pressure. And so when there's feelings of financial pressure and I've got to therefore stay in this job that I'm not feeling like I'm really loving, or I'm, here because I have to be, or if I complain, am I going to lose my job, and what would that mean for my family? So, certainly when I see clients from a counselling perspective, that snowballing of worries kicks in with a vengeance. And so being able to identify what is my thinking around this financial pressure at the moment, and how am I extrapolating that to my workplace, my life, and am I snowballing that and creating more stress for myself?
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that one of my clients asked me when we were talking about this webinar, they asked about the sort of responsibility around burnout. That I had been talking about it sort of, around personally, what can people do? And then there's that sort of, in my view, there's co-responsibility, right? Employees and leaders
Yeah,
need to be responsible for their own stuff, but organizations also have responsibility around reasonable
yeah,
workloads and all of those things, that that the demands aren't unreasonable that are being placed upon people. And I know this is the DDI stuff, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's something that we've managed to be able to kind of measure within 3 minutes within a team, and to be able to identify employee burnout early, right? So it's kind of like being able to, if you go back to that kind of stress curve, what are the early warning signs that this team is starting to feel the pinch? What are the impacts if we don't shift and if the team don't shift and change this level of stress? Chances are they're going to churn. They're going to leave. Or we're going to find absenteeism. We're going to find presenteeism, because people are just going, I'm here because I have to be here, and click the ticket on the way through. But really, I'm struggling. So it's easy. It's actually easier than it has been to be able to identify what's going on within teams around that level of stress early. But you just got to measure it. You got to measure it, and it doesn't have to take a long time. One of the questions someone asked is, how do I get into the ideal zone in terms of that stress curve? And I think what I just want to share about that is, and I'd like to hear your views as well, Emma. Everyone's solution is different, so there's not that one size fits all. But if you were to ask yourself and do a little bit of a journaling, like, what is it that how would I know when I'm in that ideal zone? or what is it that I'm not doing that I used to do when I'm in that ideal zone? If I wasn't feeling stressed, or if that particular problem or pain point that I'm experiencing wasn't there, what would that be like for me? And so when you're able to kind of ask yourself a few questions or use a coach to help you get into that zone, then that can be a very helpful strategy. Did you want to add anything more to that, Emma?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I would add would be thinking about sort of things that we know that science tells us that are quite regulating. If we're on the outside of the ideal zone, movement, fresh air, sunshine, nature, things that send signals of safety to our bodies to combat any fight or flight response that we're having, can help to bring us back a bit. That might be, going for a walk at lunchtime, getting outside, attending to our sort of basic needs around being hungry, thirsty. That if we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're tired, and we've been sitting at a screen for 8 hours, it's going to be very hard to be in that zone.
It's interesting. I go for a walk every morning. It's been my mission since February 1st, is to go for a walk at really early in the morning, get that out of our system. My husband and I go, and we've just been listening to people's conversations as we go past, and everyone's conversations are I would say everyone's conversations are a complaint. And I think, that highlighted to us, that we are quite conditioned to focus on what's not working or what's bugging us and so it's not to say we shouldn't vent and get that out of us, because that's an important part of managing stress. It's being mindful of getting stuck in the drama and getting stuck in the negativity. So what do I need to pull myself back into that optimal zone? Might be, I need to not engage in some of the drama. I need to be able to try and look at some of the positives that are going on. I don't know. It's some simplistic techniques maybe, but effective. I'm mindful of the time, and I just think it would be useful to do a quick little wrap up. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, or I'm happy to stay online for a bit longer if anyone's got any other questions. But yeah, over to you,
Emma. No, I think we've had a great discussion. I feel like we could probably talk about this all day, sharing stories and strategies and experiences. So thank you for the opportunity. It's been great. And I'm, happy to support anybody that's looking for some support with, managing their stress, or that they're concerned about burnout. And especially in the context around managing that and high performance, which I think is a really interesting space, and it can be really rewarding to partner with clients on that journey. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. And so like you say, we could talk about this forever. There are so many things and different avenues that we could talk about. I wrote a book during COVID time, so I've got quite a few spare. If anyone would like a copy.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, it's around our findings from working with a lot of people in the care and health industries. So, and one of those chapters is on burnout. So, really happy to give anyone a free copy. I just got to get rid of them now. So, if anyone's interested, just pop that in the group chat as well, or send me a private message and we'll get that out. Thank you so much, and we'll hopefully run one of these again.